Morning, afternoon, perhaps evening, whatever time you are watching this video. Glad to have you here. It is American Government class on August 20th, 2020. That is 320s if you're keeping score at home. Today for government class, we have a simple 3-item day. 3 items and done, finito. So, what are we going to do? We're going to hit you up with a 5-minute review. We started it last class. Great job. You guys were answering questions left and right. Jackie, expect you to be a little bit quicker today, okay? All right. 2, we're going to kind of melt that into our reading assignment. All right, we'll do a little 5-minute review, and we'll melt it in, kind of change gears a little bit, and talk about last class's reading assignment. Go over some of the answers to the questions that hopefully you found and sent in to me. And then number 3, we're going to talk about some political theories today. We're going to take Cornell notes. I have already sent you the sheet that you need. It's a handout that already has pre-made Cornell notes on them. You just have to add what I'm going to add on the board. Check your email for that a little bit later once we get to it if you haven't found it already. We'll be talking about divine right theory and social contract theory. But first, we go with that 5-minute review. So meet me over at my desk. All right, 5-minute review. Let's get this thing going. We're going to switch it up a little bit. Start with Bobby. Bobby, your first question is, what are the people who lived here before Columbus known as? They are not Indians, correct? They are called Native Americans. That's an important one. We're going to know that one in my class. Don't forget that. All right, number 2, let's go up the ladder here. Jennifer S., why don't you go ahead and tell me 2 names of Native American tribes that weren't used last class? Sioux, good. And? The Apache. Well done. Moving on, let's hit up Jackie S. Jackie, quick this time, huh? Let's go with, what year did Columbus discover America? There you go, kiddo. 1492 is correct. Moving on, we've got Christian. Hey, Christian, why don't you tell me what were the names of the Spanish explorers that came over that were only thirsty for gold and helped kill off a lot of Native Americans? Conquistadores. That is correct. All right, let's move it on up to Jackie H. Jackie, who is responsible for colonizing the United States? Yes, England. And follow-up question, who's responsible for colonizing Mexico and South America? Spain is correct. Let's go ahead and bring it up to Anna. Anna, since the people from England colonized in America, that's why we speak English. And since people from Spain colonized Mexico and lower South America, that's why they speak mostly Spanish. Good job. All right, Maryland, last one for you. Go ahead, tell me, what did we call the original colonies? How many were there? That should be a hint. The 13 colonies, and list 3 of them for me. Did you really list them? I knew you wouldn't. You could have said Delaware, Pennsylvania. You could have said New Jersey, New York, New Hampshire, all the news. You could have said North Carolina, South Carolina. Any of those would have worked. All 13 of them back in our lesson from the other day, okay? Now, 5-minute review done, but let's talk about what happened last class. What happened last class? Well, we had some reading and some work to do, and we had a few questions that were asked of us. The first question was, what was Aristotle a student of? Anybody who read page 1 would know that Aristotle was one of the first students of government. He was way back, long time ago, even before I was born. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of years ago. This guy was one of the first people to come up with this concept of, hey, maybe there should be some people in charge that help take care of everybody here. Aristotle. That is a big one. You'll see that on the quiz and the test coming up later. The next question was, what 4 features make up a state? Let's go ahead and call on Jackie S. Do you got this one? What 4 features make up a state? Yeah. Yeah. Yep, you're not saying anything again. It's okay. Let's move through that. 4 features that make up a state are going to be population. That means people, who's living there, a bunch of people. You got to have population to have a state. Number 2 is territory. If you don't have territory, you can't have a state. Number 3 is government. Government helps control the people and provide them with security and protection. And the 4th is a weird word that you guys probably have never heard before, sovereignty. Now, what does sovereignty mean? Sovereignty basically means to have control over your own area. Whatever you do in your area that you are in control of is up to you. So, a good example or a good way to think about this is in my classroom, in Mr. Weckbaugh's classroom, who has sovereignty? Yes, I do. I have control. Even though none of you are here right now, so I can't send any of you out with referrals, I still have control in my classroom. But is there anybody above me who might have sovereignty over the entire building and the entire school? No, not Miss Faust. Yes, Mr. Finn. Mr. Finn, Dr. White, these are people who have control over the whole building. They can come on in here, and even though I'm in my classroom and I have sovereignty over my classroom, they can tell me, hey, go ahead and ring that bell. And guess what I got to do? Got to ring the bell because they have sovereignty over the whole school. I have sovereignty over my classroom. Sovereignty, that's a word I want you to get to know. All right, our next question was, what do you call the idea that gods decide who should rule? Now, in our reading, in our reading is where you found this answer, but we're going to talk about this today as well. And that answer, you should have come up with divine right theory. Now think about that word, divine. Divine means what? Have you ever heard divine? Have you ever heard someone eating some food and say, oh my God, this cake is so divine. I can't get enough of it. Divine tends to mean heavenly or godlike. So when we talk about divine right theory, that says the gods choose who has the right to rule. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Your next question was, what does the state agree to in social contract theory? Now, if you read that, that's a contract between the people and the state. And the state agrees to, let's go with Jennifer. Jennifer, did you get that one? The state agrees to protect the people. That is correct. That's their side of a contract. So we'll talk about that later today too. Social contract means a contract between the people and the government's side of the contract is to protect the people. Our final question for the reading questions that we had was, what are the four, I'm not a math teacher, the 4 purposes of government? Let's go with Valeria. Why don't you give us that answer to that question? Question number 5, what are the 4 purposes of government? If you had anything other than maintain social order, provide public services, provide national security, and provide and control an economic system, you're wrong. Those are the 4 answers. Here's what that means. To maintain social order, that means to keep the peace. You got to keep order. You got to maintain it across the country or across the state. Number 2, provide public services. You got to give back to the people. You got to give them ways to keep them prosperous, to help them out, offer them protection, and allow them to continue living. Number 3, provide national security. You got to protect your people. You can't just let some random crazy person who's in another country with weapons invade you and take control. You have to provide that national security if you're part of the government. And then finally, number 4 was to provide and control an economic system. That means government's got to come up with some type of money, whether it's a cryptocurrency, whether it's dollars, pesos, euros. All of those things are things governments came up with for their own country, and they maintain them. That means they print them off. They create the money. They're able to establish how much it's worth, things like that. Those are the 4 purposes of government. Hope you got all those answers right. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break right now, and then we're going to get into part 3 of our class here, the Political Theories Cornell Notes. And we're going to dive deeper into divine right theory and social contract theory. So if you haven't opened up that email I sent you with the handout of Cornell Notes already printed off, make sure you go do that. Make sure you get a pencil. And that's all you need. So hit the pause button if you need to. If not, we're going to continue rolling on and hit up number 3 with Cornell Notes about political theories. Okay, guys. So this is the handout that I emailed you this morning. Feel free to print it out and write on it if you'd like, or if you're wanting to type on it in Microsoft Word like I'm about to, that is totally okay. Feel free to do so. But basically, this document is going to help us take some notes on political theories and where we get the idea of a state. Who came up with that? So first off is going to be a quick review. Essential features of a state. We should know what those are. So we'll go ahead and fill those in. Boom. Population, territory, government, and sovereignty. Remember, population is people, territory is land, government is a body to protect those people, and sovereignty is being able to have complete control and authority over your specific area. Now, those are the 4 essential features of a state, meaning you have to have those if you want to have a state. Now, when we talk about these next 2 theories, what's important to know is that they're theories. These are just ideas. And this is how people kind of decided where the state came from. And it starts with divine right theory. Now, what is divine right theory? Well, it's also known as the divine right of kings. That's important because it all has to do with kings and queens. That's why you see this little king guy right over here. And what does it mean? Well, basically, the divine right of kings means that God gave those of royal birth the right to rule. So you got to go back in history to when we had so many kings and queens, and basically the idea was that if a king and queen had a child, that child was put there by God because the gods knew that this child would be a great king. So anybody who was royalty, royal birth right here, that means God chose you to be a king. It had nothing to do with who you were, if you were a good person, if you did good things for other people. Nope. Simply, if you were born and your dad was a king and your mom was a queen, boom, baby, you get to be king. Now, at the same time, these kings and queens, they had quite a bit of power. And the people would have to obey the ruler as they would a god. Meaning whatever the ruler says, it might as well be God saying it. If the ruler said, hey, I need 14 of your sheep, well, you better give him 14 of your sheep because that's basically what God wants. As you're starting to see, this whole theory is tied up with religion. The idea behind it also isn't just kings and emperors. There's also czars and anybody else that was kind of a ruler back in the day. They got absolute authority from God or the gods if they believed in them. That means no matter what, the gods gave them the right to do what they wanted to do. Now, you don't see this a lot. This was an ancient idea. You saw it a lot back in the day in Egypt, in China, the Mayan civilizations, and the Aztecs, and maybe if you recall in Mr. Finn's class talking about the Incas. That was all
Those were all civilizations that believed in this idea, this theory that gods gave kings and queens the right to rule. Now, one thing that's also important is if the king had all this power from God, they didn't stop there. They would say that the ruler has a direct link with the gods and may even be a god himself. That's right. If you were a king back in the day, you could tell people, well, not only did God pick me, but I am probably also a god. And this is what people said, and this is what people believed for a long time, a very long time, actually. This theory was prevalent in Japan up until about 1945. That's not too long ago. That's less than 100 years ago. And Japan wasn't the only one. This was also a prevalent theory in Europe, all the way up to the 17th and 18th centuries. So we're talking the 16 and 1700s. People believe this all over Europe. So countries like England and Italy, those are countries in Europe. Now, the next two bullet points are probably the most important bullet points. And these are the things that I want you to take away from divine right theory. Divine right theory, remember, it's a theory, is most closely associated with a very specific form of government. And it's one that you hear about when you talk about kings and queens. And that form of government is monarchy. And since this is important, why don't we go ahead? We're going to bold this, and then we're also going to put it in red. So divine right theory is most closely associated with monarchy. Whenever we hear about monarchies and kings and queens that rule, it usually stems from this theory. Albeit maybe it was long ago, it still stems from that, and that's where it kind of started. And finally, the other most important point is that in divine right theory, it is not a popular idea to say power to the people or I have rights. Freedom doesn't really exist. In fact, the people exist to serve the will of the king. We're going to highlight that, also make that bold and red, because in divine right theory, it doesn't matter what a citizen wants. It matters what the king wants. If the king wants something, the people are there to get it for him, and the people should be happy to do it. Now, that's certainly not the type of government we have today. I am not happy to do something for our leader, no matter who it is. And we'll talk about where we got our form of government next class when we talk about social contract theory. For today's assignment, just make sure that you send me a picture of the notes that we took today. So everything up until this point. You may have to write small. I know. Thanks, Mr. Weckbach, for telling me that at the end of class. But take a picture, send it to me. If you need, we can write on the back of this paper next class. No worries. But email cweckbach.precisionacademy@gmail.com. As always, I will put it up right now at the end of this video. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next class.